And now President Trump is calling their bluff, noting the company said it would move its Kansas City operations to Thailand before the tariffs were announced. Hence, the president says they're just using tariffs.
One of America's most iconic brands just went head-to-head with the man who built his presidency on Made in the USA, and it blew up fast. Harley-Davidson CEO floated a plan to shift manufacturing to Mexico, and within hours, Trump hit back hard. Threats were made, tempers flared, and suddenly this wasn't just about motorcycles. It was about loyalty, power, and pride. When a symbol of American freedom clashes with a former president's vision, who comes out on top?
And for 1 week each summer, this little town of 7,000 explodes to 500,000.
But this is one city that looks nothing like the rest of.
Harley-Davidson is more than just a motorcycle company. For a lot of Americans, it's a symbol of freedom, tradition, and raw power. So when news broke that the company was considering moving part of its manufacturing to Mexico, it felt like a punch in the gut to many. People didn't just see a business decision. They saw what looked like a betrayal. But if you look closer, the story is more complicated than that. This wasn't about turning away from American workers or giving up on U.S. manufacturing. It was about survival. The company was getting squeezed from all directions. Rising labor costs in the United States, fierce competition from overseas manufacturers, and the pressure to stay profitable in a shrinking market. Harley wasn't thriving like it used to. The brand that once defined the American road trip was struggling to keep up with a new generation of riders who weren't buying into the same dream. At the same time, the global motorcycle market was shifting fast. Foreign companies were producing bikes at a fraction of the cost, and they were gaining ground, especially in Asia and Europe. To stay in the race, Harley needed a way to cut costs without completely compromising quality. That's where Mexico came in.
Told them, here's what we're going to do. We're going to charge a tariff on steel until such time as you straighten out your act and you let us have fair.
Moving part of the production south of the border wasn't about abandoning America. It was about finding a way to keep the company alive without raising prices even higher. The idea was to manufacture some components or models in Mexico, not the entire lineup. But that subtle detail got buried under the noise of headlines and political outrage. The decision set off a firestorm, especially in Washington. President Donald Trump, who had campaigned heavily on bringing manufacturing back to the U.S., didn't take it lightly. To him, Harley's move was more than disappointing. It felt like a slap in the face. After all, here was a legendary American brand seen as the epitome of Made in the USA, signaling that America wasn't competitive enough anymore.
The president tweeted out this. He said, many Harley-Davidson owners plan to boycott the company if manufacturing moves overseas. Great, the president wrote on Twitter. So I asked Sarah.
The reaction was swift and loud. Trump publicly blasted Harley-Davidson, threatening tariffs and calling for a boycott. He accused the company of using foreign labor to dodge taxes and undercut American workers. And even though the company tried to explain its reasoning, that it was trying to stay afloat in a brutally competitive global market, the damage was done. The backlash wasn't just political. Some loyal Harley riders felt betrayed too. Social media was full of heated debates, and even some longtime customers said they would never buy another Harley again. The company suddenly found itself not only fighting economic pressures but also defending its legacy. But behind the headlines, the truth was simpler. Harley-Davidson was stuck. Staying 100% American-made was a proud idea, but one that was getting harder to afford. Manufacturing in the U.S. comes with higher costs, from labor and materials to compliance and insurance. Meanwhile, rivals in countries like India and China were building cheaper bikes, faster, and flooding the market.
The president about the issue related to China. That's all that's going to happen. With respect to other countries, there's absolutely nothing on the table.
But that statement put Navarro at odds with the Treasury.
When news broke that Harley-Davidson was planning to shift some of its manufacturing to Mexico, it didn't just trigger headlines. It set off a political firestorm, and leading that charge, as always, was Donald Trump. He didn't hold back. Within hours, the former president had taken to social media, calling the move a slap in the face to American workers and an insult to everything his America First message stood for. Trump had campaigned hard on bringing manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., especially in industries that symbolized American grit, like steel, coal, and of course, motorcycles. So when Harley, an iconic brand built on American image and pride, announced it was shifting production outside the country, it felt personal. Trump made it clear he saw it that way too.
The president has made his feelings on that very clear. The president's focus is on making sure that we get good trade deals and that we keep business and industry here in the United States.
In a fiery rally speech just days after the announcement, Trump warned that Harley could face consequences if it went through with the plan. He didn't just criticize the decision, he threatened action. "If Harley-Davidson wants to build bikes overseas and sell them here," he shouted to a cheering crowd, "they better be ready for a 200% tariff." That's right, 200%. The crowd roared. But in boardrooms and factories, jaws dropped. That wasn't just talk. Trump's administration had already been aggressive with tariffs on steel and aluminum, sparking trade tensions with countries like China and the EU. Now he was pointing that same firepower at an American company, and that shook up the business world. Trump's message was clear. No one was above the America First doctrine, not even Harley-Davidson.
Tom Sands, a postal worker who rides up from Kentucky each year and, like so many I talk to, sees proof of Trump's brilliance in the booming economy. What they'll tell you.
But the situation wasn't as black and white as Trump made it seem. Harley executives tried to explain the decision. They weren't trying to offshore everything. They were only moving a portion of their manufacturing to remain competitive globally. Countries like India and Thailand were already producing bikes for their regional markets. Mexico, with its lower costs and favorable trade logistics, was the next logical step. For Harley, it was about staying alive, not turning their back on the US. Still, that didn't matter to Trump. He doubled down, taking to Twitter, or now X, again and again to blast Harley. "They've surrendered. They waved the white flag. They're finished," he tweeted. The attacks kept coming, and so did the media frenzy. What followed was a PR nightmare for Harley-Davidson. Loyal customers were confused. Some longtime riders threatened to boycott the brand. Dealers were left scrambling to do damage control. Meanwhile, Harley's stock took a hit. Investors don't like uncertainty, especially when it's fueled by presidential anger. And yet, for all of Trump's fury, the company held its ground, for a while. They insisted the move was temporary, strategic, and essential. But they couldn't ignore the fallout. The image of Harley, the all-American bike riding across wide-open roads, had collided head-on with the hard reality of global business and presidential politics.
That they think that what's going on with Harley-Davidson is wrong, and they'd like to see companies bring more manufacturing back to the United States, regardless of what the overall tariff picture is here in the...
As the political backlash mounted, and former President Trump launched public attacks, Harley-Davidson's leadership stood firm. From the outside, critics saw the company's decision to move some manufacturing operations to Mexico as unpatriotic, almost like treason against American workers. But inside the company, the story sounded very different. CEO Jochen Zeitz didn't mince words when he defended the move. To him, it wasn't about abandoning America. It was about keeping Harley-Davidson alive in a global economy that had changed drastically over the past 2 decades. "This is not about selling out," he said in a press conference. "It's about staying alive."
I'm just saying they don't need to have $30. They can have 3. They don't need to have 250 pencils. They can have 5.
But you're basically saying...
Zeitz pointed to the same harsh realities many manufacturing companies are facing today. Skyrocketing costs in the US, severe parts shortages, supply chain bottlenecks, and unpredictable tariffs. According to Harley, the decision to shift some production to Mexico wasn't made lightly, and it certainly wasn't a first choice. But in today's economic climate, it was one of the only options left on the table.
Elsewhere, it's around this whole topic that's just gained steam.
So just to set the record straight, we sell motorcycles in over 100 countries around the world overnight.
One major issue is domestic manufacturing costs. Producing bikes in the US has become significantly more expensive, especially when factoring in union wages, energy costs, and regulatory compliance. These costs are manageable in boom times, but when demand dips or the market gets tight, as it has in recent years, they can become a crushing burden. Zeitz argued that without some international flexibility, Harley would lose its competitive edge to foreign manufacturers who are building similar bikes at a fraction of the price. Then there's the global supply chain crisis. Since the COVID-19 pandemic, the entire manufacturing world has been turned upside down. Key components, from computer chips to brake systems, have been delayed or gone missing altogether. Suppliers have gone bankrupt. Shipping lanes have slowed. The company simply couldn't rely on one country alone to build and deliver their motorcycles anymore. Harley needed agility, and Mexico, with its proximity to the US, skilled labor force, and lower costs, became a logical strategic partner. Zeitz also made a compelling case for why Harley's American identity wasn't being erased. The company's headquarters are still in Milwaukee. Most of its research and design is still done in the US. Many of its flagship motorcycles will continue to be built in American factories. We are and always will be an American company, he said. But being American means being smart, being tough, and knowing how to survive.
And I mean, in this case, steel and aluminum. What we were really affected by as a company was European response to that action. And the European response.
Still, not everyone bought the argument. Critics, including President Trump, claimed the move betrayed the very workers and customers who built the brand. But supporters of Harley's decision argue the opposite, that doing nothing would have been the real betrayal. Letting the company fall behind or go bankrupt just to cling to outdated ideals would have cost far more American jobs in the long run. The truth is, the motorcycle industry has changed, so has the world. And Harley-Davidson, like every other company trying to stay relevant in the 21st century, is being forced to adapt. Zeitz's message was clear. It's not treason, it's business. And if Harley wants to keep building bikes for the next generation of riders, it has to play by new rules. Whether or not the public accepts that explanation is another story. But one thing is certain. The fight between Harley-Davidson and Donald Trump opened up a much bigger conversation about what it means to be an American company in a global economy, and who gets to decide.
Of the segments that are popular in Europe, so preserving the integrity of that market position that we have is very important. Preserving the distribution channel that we've built over.
The clash between Harley-Davidson and Donald Trump didn't just end with angry tweets and bold statements. It exploded into a full-blown cultural and political storm. And the fallout? It hit fast, hard, and in ways the company probably didn't see coming. Trump's core supporters wasted no time showing their outrage. Social media was flooded with calls to boycott Harley-Davidson. Hashtags like #BoycottHarley and #SellYourHarley started trending within hours. Viral videos began popping up across Facebook and TikTok. Bikers burning their Harley gear, tearing logos off their jackets, and vowing to never ride another Harley again. For a brand that built its identity around loyalty, freedom, and patriotism, the message couldn't have been more brutal. People felt betrayed. Many of these angry voices came from Harley's own base. The company's most loyal customers, middle-class, working Americans, many of them veterans or blue-collar workers, felt personally attacked. They didn't see the Mexico move as a business decision. They saw it as Harley turning its back on American jobs and American pride. That emotional reaction spread like wildfire, stoked by Trump's own words painting Harley as a sellout. And then came the financial pain. Within days of the controversy, Harley's stock took a hit. Investors watched as the brand's once ironclad image got dragged through political mud. Market analysts noted a dip in consumer confidence, especially in the US, which remains Harley's biggest and most loyal market. While the actual production shift to Mexico only affected part of Harley's output, the PR disaster painted a picture that the entire company was abandoning America. Perception, in this case, was just as damaging as reality. Dealerships began to feel the squeeze too. Some reported that foot traffic slowed down. Potential buyers, once excited about grabbing their dream bike, were now hesitant, worried about public perception, or simply caught up in the emotion of the moment. A few dealers even spoke out, asking the company to clear the air and reconnect with their American roots. The timing couldn't have been worse. The motorcycle industry had already been facing sluggish sales for years. Now, Harley was staring at a self-inflicted wound.
We're rolled up to the biggest bike rally in the world to discover which side the bikers are on.
But not everyone saw the situation as black and white. Some economists and business analysts offered a warning. Punishing Harley-Davidson might end up hurting American workers more than helping them. While Trump's threats of tariffs made for strong soundbites, experts pointed out that retaliatory policies could backfire. Tariffs could raise the price of Harley bikes domestically, reduce sales, and force the company to cut jobs, not just in manufacturing, but across its entire ecosystem, including sales, logistics, and service. If you cripple Harley's ability to sell bikes, you're not just hurting a CEO in a boardroom, one analyst told CNBC. You're hurting the guy working the paint booth in Milwaukee. You're hurting the trucker hauling bikes across the country. You're hurting the small-town dealership trying to keep its lights on. Even some of Trump's supporters began to question the approach. While they agreed with his push to keep manufacturing in the US, they worried that a scorched earth response could hurt American business overall. The situation sparked debates about how to balance patriotism with economic survival in a global economy that simply doesn't play by one country's rules anymore. Through it all, Harley-Davidson remained mostly quiet, careful not to escalate the feud, but also not backing down from its decision. The company insisted that it was committed to American manufacturing, pointing out that the majority of its bikes were still made in the US. But in politics and PR, nuance doesn't always win. The damage was done, and now Harley had to deal with a crisis that went far beyond profit margins. It was about identity.
The U.S. market and the rest of the world will continue to be made in the United States. How are the president's tweets and tariffs playing out at Harley dealership?
This whole showdown between Harley-Davidson and Donald Trump wasn't just about one company making a controversial move. It was about something much bigger, the tug of war between nationalism and global business. At the heart of the drama was a simple but uncomfortable question. Can American companies survive if they're forced to stay local? Let's be honest. Business today isn't what it used to be. Decades ago, a company could build and sell everything right here in the US and thrive. But the world changed. Global supply chains became the norm. Companies now source parts from multiple countries, assemble them in others, and sell products across borders. Why? Because it's cheaper, faster, and often the only way to stay competitive. And Harley-Davidson is no exception.
You haven't seen it yet, George, but if I came into your dealership today and I said, hey, I don't want to buy a Harley because of the president's tweets, I want to buy something else, a comparable motorcycle. Is there a comparable motorcycle?
For years, Harley has faced shrinking sales, an aging customer base, and rising costs. Motorcycles aren't just built with steel and rubber. They rely on a vast network of suppliers, many of them outside the United States. From brake components made in Japan to electrical parts sourced from Europe or Mexico, building a bike isn't as American-made as some might think. And that's not shady or greedy, it's business reality. So when Trump demanded that Harley stay in America or face consequences, he was speaking to a deep sense of pride. Many Americans, especially in manufacturing towns, have watched factories disappear and jobs get shipped overseas. Trump tapped into that anger with his America First agenda. But here's the thing. Just because it sounds good in a speech doesn't mean it's always practical in a boardroom. From Harley's side, the decision to consider Mexico wasn't about being unpatriotic. It was about survival. Labor costs in Mexico are lower, taxes are different, and production timelines can be more efficient when serving international markets. In other words, if you want to sell motorcycles globally, you sometimes need to build them globally too. And that's where the tension comes in, between political optics and business reality.
Nobody's come in and chastised or asked about it or anything like that?
Not at all.
Are you surprised?
No, Harley-Davidson,
Politicians want to keep jobs local. They want headlines that say, American company stays American. But CEOs have to answer to shareholders. They have to keep the business afloat. And sometimes that means making unpopular decisions. That's exactly what Harley's leadership did. They chose sustainability over sentiment, which is never an easy sell, especially when national pride is involved. It's also worth noting that Harley wasn't alone. Around the same time, other companies like Ford, Carrier, and General Motors faced similar criticism from political leaders over offshoring plans. Each time, the debate was the same. Loyalty to country versus loyalty to company survival. And each time, companies had to weigh what would hurt them more, public backlash or financial failure. What makes Harley's case unique is how symbolic the brand is. It's not just any business. It's a cultural icon. People tattoo the logo on their arms. They name their kids after Harleys. So when the company took a step away from US-based manufacturing, it didn't feel like business. It felt personal. But maybe it's time we start seeing these decisions for what they are. Difficult trade-offs in a complex global economy. You can want to protect American jobs and still understand why a company might need to move part of its operations abroad. Those two things aren't always at war with each other. The world is interconnected now. You can't just flip a switch and go back to how things were in the 1950s. The real challenge is figuring out how to support American workers while also giving American companies the tools to compete worldwide. And that's not just Harley's problem. So, what are your thoughts on this? Let us know in the comments below.